Hi, I'm Gracie Peters. I decided to do my presentation over legal issues in teaching. So to begin my presentation, I'm just going to go over some background information. So before legal issues were addressed in the classroom, both parents and students viewed education as a special opportunity that put definite responsibilities on the student's shoulder. So unlike today, students weren't expected to go to school, but if they were in school, then they were going for an education to better their lives. So legal authority of the teachers was based on the principle of in loco parentis, meaning in the place of parents. With this being said, teachers had more of a parental role in the student's life and made decisions based on what they felt was best for the student or the students involved. Teachers' leeway in treating students was fairly broad, their authority was wide, and their decisions were rarely questioned. So with this one, it goes along with the second bullet point. So teachers being more of a parental role with the students, they didn't really get shamed for treating the students as they were their own child. They made the decisions for the student based on what they felt was best for the student, acting like they would be the student's parents. So in this presentation, I will go over some of the more important legal issues facing teachers. I would love to go over all of the legal issues facing teachers, but I would never get done with this presentation. So to begin, the teacher and due process. So the essential meaning of due process in education is that fairness should be rendered and teachers' rights as individuals should not be violated. So the Fifth and 14th Amendment protect due process. The Fifth Amendment states no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and the 14th Amendment adds, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So some of the most influential court decisions concerning education, teachers, and law concern fundamental issues of due process. An example of a violation of a teacher's rights to due process: a teacher gives a speech at a meeting of the local Gay and Lesbian Alliance. The newspaper runs a story on the event, and the superintendent asks her to resign quietly. The teacher above did not get an opportunity to explain his or herself. Is it fair that this teacher got fired? In order to determine the fairness of an action, so in the example above, the action would be her resigning. There are two types of due processes. Substantive due process has to do with the issue itself, and procedural due process concerns with the fairness of the process followed. So the next issue, legal issue facing teachers, is liability. The teacher should accept liability for the student's dislocated shoulder. This is an example of a teacher being liable for something. So in this instance, the teacher's liability means blame, and it implies that the teacher behaved negligently or intentionally in a way that allowed the student to be injured. Teachers are responsible for ensuring the safety of students in their classroom and in the activities that they oversee. So after school events, or if they are watching sporting events that would also be after school, they are responsible for anything that happens there. And to be able to show that a teacher has been reasonably prudent, they need to be able to meet the following criteria. They made a reasonable attempt to anticipate dangerous situations, they provided proper supervision, they took precautions, they established rules, they gave a warning to minimize the chances of a student getting hurt. It is important for teachers to be covered by some sort of liability insurance because they are vulnerable to a legal suit. So before buying more insurance than needed, be sure that you pay attention to whether or not you are already covered by your school district's insurance policies. Some teachers get caught up in more insurance than they already need because they don't realize that they're already covered under the insurance in their school. So just two cases that involved teachers' liability for students' injury. Sheehan versus St. Peter's Catholic School in 1971. The ruling was a teacher is liable for a student's injuries if he or she leaves students unsupervised. And then the second case is Mancha versus Field Museum of Natural History, 1971. So in this one, the teacher took the class to a field museum and they let the class observe all of the different exhibits by themselves. The teacher was in one hall, the students were in another, or a student was in another hall, and kids that were not a part of the class actually came up to the student and beat him up. So the ruling for this one, a teacher is not liable for students' injuries under unusual circumstances, so the fight in the museum, if he or she has taken appropriate precautions. Right, so the next one is reporting child abuse. While protecting students from harm inside of the school setting, teachers also have the legal responsibility to protect the student against abuse and neglect from the parents or other adults. So while the laws that pertain to reporting child abuse vary from state to state, they all include two or more of the following in their definitions of of abuse and neglect, physical injury, mental or emotional injury, sexual molestation, or exploitation. If a teacher suspects that a student has experienced any of these, they are legally obligated to report it to their appropriate authorities. A teacher can report abuse and neglect even if they are not certain that there has been any. In a case involving abuse and neglect, it is better to be safe than sorry. If you do report this, your report will usually be kept confidential, so the teacher is protected from a reaction or to a report if it is true or even if it's not true. If you are going to report abuse or neglect of a child, be sure to know the procedures and protocol the school you are teaching at uses. Most schools are going to have a rule book or just a book guiding you on how to deal with this situation and how to go about taking the steps to report it. All right, and my last point is conduct with the students. I feel like this is a very important one, especially in today's society with stuff that has been going on. So courts are very strict regarding socially unacceptable behavior that becomes involved in the classroom. One example of this is that teachers become too involved with students. So this could be anywhere from a teacher making a sexual advance or engaging in any kind of sexual relationship with a student, to a teacher caring for a student too much and eventually suing their parents for custody of said student. So with the second example, a teacher actually had a student live with him, and the parents were okay with it and everything like that. The student lived with him for 9 months, and then eventually when the mom wanted her child to come back home and live with them, the teacher who got too involved sued his parents for custody of this child. So with this, he exploited his position as a teacher, which provided the just cause for termination. So when in the public eye, teachers carry a heavy weight of responsibility to be a role model. So this means when they're out, they're not supposed to smoke weed, take other drugs, publicly drink to the point of drunkenness, or even use excessively obscene language in the presence of students. So just being in the public eye and being known that you're a teacher, you should be aware that you are looked up to as a role model, even to some of the parents of your students. And my last point is courts allow a decent amount of freedom in their private and personal lifestyles as long as their choices and behavior do not adversely affect their performance as teachers. So as long as you're conducting yourself appropriately and you're not going over and beyond, you should be fine as a teacher. Just don't get too involved, don't have sexual relationships, don't get too drunk, anything like that. Otherwise, I think these are some of the most important points that regard teachers and legal issues facing teachers. If you have any questions for me, please let me know, and thank you for watching.